The rain fell hard against the transport ship's windows as it cut through Earth's atmosphere. Captain sat in silence, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on nothing. She had been a soldier for 12 years. She had seen things that would break most people. She had done things she would never speak about. But tonight, the ghosts were louder than usual. Her communicator buzzed. It was Lieutenant, her closest friend and teammate. The message was brief and coded, but understood it immediately. The summit was happening. The Empire had agreed to peace talks, and she was assigned to the security detail. Closed her eyes and let out a slow breath. Of course she was assigned. She was one of Earth's best ghost operatives. She had spent 3 years deep in space, gathering intelligence that prevented a war. She knew their culture, their language, their ways. She was the obvious choice. But they didn't know everything. They didn't know about the Cubs. 3 years ago had been inserted into the Empire with one mission: find out if they were building illegal weapons. There were a species of warriors, leonine creatures with golden fur, sharp claws, and a sense of honor that was both beautiful and brutal. They controlled 12 star systems and had been growing more aggressive toward human colonies. Had her body altered for the mission? Her scent was masked with pheromone markers. Her appearance was changed just enough to pass as a humanoid from one of the border colonies. She was given a cover identity as a maintenance worker in a military research facility deep in territory. The facility was massive, cold, and efficient. Warriors moved through the corridors like living weapons, their every movement precise and controlled. Kept her head down, did her work, and gathered information. She found evidence of treaty violations, weapon designs that could devastate entire planets. She documented everything and prepared to extract. Then she found the Cubs. They were in a lower level of the facility in a room that wasn't on any official map. 4 small cubs, maybe 6 months old, huddled together in a cold storage unit. Their fur was matted and dirty. Their eyes were dull with hunger. When approached, they didn't even have the energy to growl. She accessed the facility records and learned the truth. The cubs' parents had died in a training accident. In culture, orphans without family lines were considered burdens. They had no honor, no value. The cubs were scheduled for termination in 3 days. Stood in that cold room for a long time, looking at the 4 small creatures who were waiting to die. She thought about her mission, about the importance of staying hidden, about the war she was trying to prevent. She thought about all the logical reasons to walk away. Then the smallest cub made a soft chirping sound and made a choice that would change everything. She couldn't take them with her. That would expose her mission and probably get them all killed. But she could keep them alive. She could give them food, warmth, and protection until she figured out what to do. For 6 months lived 2 lives. During the day, she was a maintenance worker, invisible and unremarkable. At night, she was a guardian to 4 growing cubs. She brought them food stolen from the facility kitchens. She cleaned their space and brought them blankets. She played with them, taught them to hunt using damaged equipment as toys, and held them when they had nightmares. The cubs bonded to her completely. They learned her scent, her voice, her patterns. The largest one, a male with dark stripes, was protective and brave. The female with silver-tipped ears was fierce and quick. The bulky male was gentle despite his size. And the smallest, a female with bright gold eyes, was curious about everything. Knew it couldn't last. Her mission was almost complete. She had the intelligence Earth needed. But she kept delaying her extraction, kept finding reasons to stay 1 more week, 1 more day. Then her cover was blown. She never found out how they discovered her. Maybe it was bad luck. Maybe it was a mistake she didn't even know she made. But suddenly, alarms were screaming through the facility and warriors were hunting for the human spy. Had minutes to reach the extraction point. She ran through the facility corridors, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She passed the lower-level entrance and heard the cubs crying out. They knew something was wrong. They were calling for her. She stopped at the door. Her hand hovered over the access panel. She could go to them one last time. She could try to take them with her. But the warriors were coming. If she went to the cubs now, they would all die. The only chance, the only hope, was for her to lead the warriors away and pray that someone with mercy would find the cubs later. Ran, she left the facility, reached the extraction point, and escaped into space while ships pursued her. She delivered the intelligence to Earth. She prevented the war. She was decorated as a hero. But every night since then, she heard the cubs crying. Now, 3 years later, she was sitting in a transport ship heading to a peace summit, and according to the encrypted message she had received, the cubs were alive. They had been found and adopted by a prominent family. They had grown into young warriors, and they would be at the summit as part of the honor guard. Looked out the window at the stars rushing past. She had survived impossible missions. She had faced death without flinching. But the thought of seeing those cubs again, now grown and thinking she had abandoned them, terrified her more than any enemy ever had. The transport ship began its final approach to station, the neutral meeting ground where humans and would try to forge a peace. Stood and straightened her uniform. She was a ghost operative. She knew how to hide in plain sight, how to mask her identity, how to be invisible even in a crowded room. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a truth she couldn't ignore. The cubs had known her scent. They had memorized every detail of the person who saved them and never forgot. Her identity would be hidden behind her uniform and her professional mask. She would stand guard at the summit and do her duty, but somewhere in the back of her mind knew that the moment those cubs caught her scent, everything would change. The transport docked with a metallic clang. The doors opened, and Captain walked into a station where her past was waiting for her, where 4 cubs she had saved now stood as warriors, and where the fragile hope of peace rested on secrets that might not stay buried. Station floated in the darkness between territories, a massive structure of metal and glass that belonged to no one and everyone. It was neutral ground, built specifically for moments like this when species who didn't trust each other needed to talk. Walked through the station's main corridor with the rest of Earth's security team. Lieutenant was beside her, checking her equipment with practiced efficiency. Sergeant Minu was ahead, his jaw tight with tension. He had fought against the in-border conflicts. He had lost friends to their claws. He didn't want to be here. Ambassador led their delegation. He was a tall man with gray hair and patient eyes. He had spent 40 years in diplomatic service, and he believed that this summit could end decades of Cold War between humans and the Empire. He believed peace was possible. Wished he shared his certainty. The delegation reached the main reception hall. It was a vast space with transparent walls showing the stars beyond. Seats were arranged in 2 sections, one for each species. In the center was a raised platform where the actual negotiations would happen. They had not yet arrived. The humans waited in formation, trying not to show their nervousness. Even the most experienced among them had never been this close to warriors before. Most of what they knew came from combat reports and intelligence files. Then the far doors opened, and the delegation entered. They were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Each warrior stood over 2 meters tall, their bodies covered in fur that ranged from gold to bronze to deep amber. They moved with fluid grace, every step purposeful and controlled. Their eyes reflected light like cats, and their presence filled the room with a weight that was almost physical. Leading them was War Prince. He was massive even among his own kind, with golden fur marked by old battle scars. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed in the station's light, and when he walked, other warriors instinctively gave him space. This was a creature born to command, whose authority needed no words. Behind came his honor guard, 4 young warriors, siblings by adoption if not by blood. They wore matching armor and moved in perfect synchronization. His breath caught in her throat. She recognized them instantly. The male with dark stripes across his shoulders, taller now and heavily muscled. The female with silver-tipped ears, her movements quick and precise. The bulky male who was gentle despite his size. And the smallest, a female with bright gold eyes that saw everything. They had grown. The cubs she had protected were now warriors in their own right, trained and dangerous and beautiful. But she knew them. She would have known them anywhere. The formal greetings began. Ambassador stepped forward and spoke in careful, welcoming them to the summit. War Prince responded with equal formality, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in the chest. Stood at attention with the other security officers, trying to keep her face neutral. She had a scent suppressor built into her armor, a device that masked human pheromones and prevented them from reading emotions through smell. It should keep her hidden. The reception proceeded smoothly. Humans and exchanged diplomatic pleasantries, each side careful not to give offense, but noticed something strange. The four young warriors in honor guard were acting oddly. The male with dark stripes kept glancing toward the human security detail. The female with silver ears had her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The gentle giant was perfectly still, but his tail was twitching with agitation. And the smallest one, the female with gold eyes, kept making soft sounds that her siblings tried to quiet. Stomach tightened. They were searching for something or someone. The first day of the summit ended without incident. The delegations retreated to their separate quarters, found in the security office, running system checks that didn't need to be run. You saw them, said quietly. It wasn't a question. Nodded. She had told the truth months ago, unable to carry the secret alone anymore. Had been shocked but understanding. She knew what it meant to make impossible choices. They've grown, said. Her voice was barely a whisper. They're warriors now, real warriors. I don't know if they remember or if. They remember, interrupted. Did you see how they were acting? They were searching, and you know what senses are like. Did know. Could identify individuals by scent with perfect accuracy. It was as unique to them as fingerprints were to humans. She had a suppressor, but it was 3 years old, built for a different mission. If it failed, even for a moment. On the second day, was assigned to security sweep duty. She needed to check the station's ventilation systems for any signs of tampering. It was routine work, boring and necessary. She was deep in the maintenance tunnels when her suppressor malfunctioned. It was a brief failure, maybe 30 seconds before the backup system engaged. But it was enough. Her true human scent flooded into the ventilation system, carried through the station's air recycling. Fixed the suppressor with shaking hands and reported back to the security office. Ran diagnostics and found evidence of sabotage. Someone had damaged the suppressor with a targeted signal. Someone wanted it to fail. We have bigger problems, said, pulling up security footage. Watch this. The footage showed the main negotiation session from an hour ago. Ambassador and War Prince were discussing trade agreements. Everything looked normal until suddenly, all four young warriors reacted at once. Their heads snapped toward the ventilation grate. The male with dark stripes went rigid, his pupils dilating. The female with silver ears gasped. The gentle giant made a sound like a question, and the smallest one, the female with gold eyes, made a chirping noise that echoed through the chamber. It was the same sound she had made as a cub when brought her food. War Prince noticed his adopted children's reaction immediately. He glanced at them with sharp eyes, but they quickly regained their composure and returned to attention. The negotiations continued, but was watching his warriors now, suspicious and alert. They caught your scent, said, and now their father knows something is wrong. That night couldn't sleep. She stood in her quarters looking out at the stars, thinking about 4 cubs who had grown into warriors. They had recognized her. After 3 years, despite everything, they knew her scent. What would they do with that knowledge? Would they tell that a human had been deep in territory? Would they demand answers for why she left them? Or did they remember that she had saved their lives? The next day brought a private meeting request. War Prince wanted to discuss security coordination between the human and protection details. He specifically requested Captain's presence. Ambassador approved without question. He thought it was a good sign that the wanted to cooperate on security. He didn't know that was hunting for answers. Walked to the meeting room with her heart pounding, squeezed her shoulder before she entered. Minyu gave her a questioning look but said nothing. The door opened. Inside, War Prince sat at a table with his 4 adopted warriors standing behind him. The room was small and private. No recording devices, no witnesses. Entered and stood at attention. The door closed behind her with a final sounding click. For a long moment no one spoke, studied her with eyes that missed nothing. The 4 young warriors were perfectly still, but she could see the tension in their bodies, the barely controlled emotion. Then the smallest one, the female with gold eyes, made that chirping sound again. His ear flicked in acknowledgement, but he didn't look away from. Captain said slowly. His accent was thick, but his human language was perfect. My children are disturbed. They smell something that should not be here, something from their past. Kept her face neutral. War Prince, I don't understand. Don't you? Leaned forward. 3 years ago my children were orphans, condemned to death by our own laws. Then someone saved them, fed them, protected them. They never saw this person clearly, only caught glimpses in darkness, but they remember the scent. The room felt very small suddenly, very quiet. They smell that same scent now, continued. Coming from one of the human security officers, coming from you. The moment stretched, could lie, she could deny everything. She could maintain her cover and protect the mission security. But looking at the 4 warriors behind, seeing the confusion and hope in their eyes, she found she couldn't do it. Yes, said quietly, I was there, I saved them, it was me. The room erupted. The smallest warrior, the female with gold eyes, broke formation. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and stopped directly in front of. Up close, she was massive, easily twice size, with claws that could tear through steel. But her eyes were the same eyes that had looked up at 3 years ago in a cold storage room. She leaned down and breathed in deeply, confirming what she already knew. Then she made that chirping sound again, louder now, filled with recognition and joy. Myra, return to position, commanded, but his voice was not harsh. The young warrior obeyed, stepping back to stand with her siblings, but she never took her eyes off. The male with dark stripes was trembling with controlled emotion. The female with silver ears had her hand on her weapon, not threatening but ready, uncertain. The gentle giant stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. War Prince rose to his full height. You were the spy, the one we hunted 3 years ago. You were deep in our most secure facility, gathering intelligence while pretending to be a simple maintenance worker. Yes, said, there was no point in denying it now. You violated our sovereignty. You stole our secrets. By law, you should be executed for this crime. Yes. Moved around the table, each step deliberate. He stopped in front of, towering over her. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more complex. But you also saved 4 lives that our own empire had condemned. You fed them when they were starving. You protected them when they were defenseless. You gave them hope when they had none. The male with dark stripes, the one remembered as being protective and brave, finally spoke. His name was, she would learn later. His voice was rough with emotion. Why did you leave us? The question cut deeper than any claw could. Had asked herself the same thing 1,000 times. I had no choice, she said. My cover was blown. Warriors were hunting me. If I had stayed, if I had tried to take you with me, we all would have died. I thought leaving you was the only way you might survive. We cried for you, the smallest one, Myra said. Her voice was young despite her warrior's body. For weeks after you left, we cried. We thought you abandoned us because we were worthless, because we were orphans with no honor. Felt something break inside her chest. Never. You were never worthless. I left because I loved you enough to want you to live, even if it meant living without me. The gentle giant, whose name was, spoke for the first time. Father found us 2 weeks after you left. He heard about the orphans in the facility and came to see if we could be saved. He adopted us into his family line, gave us honor, trained us as warriors. But we never forgot your scent, the female with silver ears added. Her name was. We never forgot how you held us when we were afraid or how you taught us to be strong. War Prince watched this exchange with sharp intelligence. He was a warrior and a leader, and he was putting pieces together. You risked everything to save them, he said to. Why? They were not your species. They were enemies of your people. Why did one human care about 4 cubs? Because they were children, said simply. Because they were going to die for something that wasn't their fault. Because it was the right thing to do. Before could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the station. His voice came over the emergency channel. All security personnel report immediately. We have a situation. Multiple bombs detected throughout the station. The room erupted into action, and his warriors moved toward the door, was right behind them. Whatever complicated emotions existed between them would have to wait. The summit was under attack. They reached the command center where Ambassador and the senior staff were gathering. Had multiple screens showing security data, her fingers flying across the controls. Someone planted explosives throughout the station, she reported. 12 devices total, hidden in critical infrastructure. They're on a synchronized timer set to detonate in 4 hours. Can you disarm them? Ambassador asked. Not remotely. Each one has different anti-tampering mechanisms. We'll need teams to physically reach each device and disarm it manually, and we'll need people who know what they're doing. Sergeant Minu stepped forward. How did bombs get on the station? We screened everything. They were already here, said grimly. Hidden weeks ago before the summit was even announced. Someone planned this in advance. War Prince growled low in his throat. Someone who wants this peace to fail. Someone who wants our peoples to remain enemies. Ambassador made a decision. We evacuate immediately. Get everyone to the transport ships. If we evacuate, we prove that peace is impossible, said. We prove that humans and cannot work together even to save our own lives. Whoever planted these bombs wins. Looked at the leader for a long moment. Then he nodded. You're right, we stay. We work together to stop this. He turned to the assembled security teams, human and, we have 4 hours to find and disarm 12 bombs. We'll need to split into teams, human and working together. Time is short, so put aside your differences and focus on survival. Pulled up a map of the station. Red dots marked the bomb locations. These 6 are in human-accessible areas. These 6 are in sections designed for, with different atmosphere and gravity. We'll need mixed teams to cover everything. Found herself assigned to the main reactor control with the eldest of the cubs she had saved. The device there was one of the most dangerous, positioned where its detonation would trigger a cascade failure. They moved through the station corridors at a run. Other teams were splitting off to their assigned targets. Minu was paired with, was working with. Ambassador and War Prince were coordinating from the command center, with Myra serving as a runner between locations. And reached the reactor level and found the bomb exactly where said it would be. It was a sophisticated device, military grade with multiple. Knelt beside it and began analyzing the mechanism. Stood guard, his enhanced senses alert for any threats. For a few minutes they worked in tense silence. Then spoke. I thought about you every day after you left. His hands didn't stop moving, but she listened. I wondered if you were real or if I had imagined you. Sometimes I thought maybe you were a dream I had when I was starving and dying. But your scent was in my memory, as real as anything. "I'm sorry I left you," said quietly. "I'm sorry I couldn't take you with me." "Father told us about orphan cubs," continued. "He said that in culture, we are considered to have no value because we have no bloodline. He also said that was wrong, that the law was cruel and foolish. He adopted us to prove that orphans could become warriors just as strong as any others. Found the primary trigger mechanism, and began the delicate process of disconnecting it. You proved that before Father did," said. "You looked at 4 worthless orphans and decided we were worth saving. You're not even, but you understood our value better than our own empire did." "You were never worthless," said. "Not for 1 second." She disconnected the final wire. The bomb's timer stopped. The device was safe. "Target neutralized," she reported over the comm, moving to the next location. His voice came back. "Good work, but we have a problem. I've identified the saboteur. It's Commander, one of our own security officers. He's part of a group called Pure Frontier. They're extremists who think humanity should stay isolated from aliens." "Where is he now?" asked. "Unknown. He's gone dark, and I'm detecting unauthorized access to the bomb network. He's trying to trigger them manually." And looked at each other. They both understood what this meant. Somewhere on the station, a human extremist was trying to destroy everything and everyone aboard to prevent peace between their species. "Find him," his voice came over the comm. "All teams, priority 1 is locating Commander. The bombs are secondary. If he can trigger them remotely, disarming them individually won't matter." Pulled up the station schematics on her wrist display. "If I wanted to access the bomb network without being detected, where would I go?" His eyes narrowed. "The old maintenance control room. Section 7, lower level. It was decommissioned, but the systems are still active." They ran. Behind them, other teams were reporting in. Devices were being disarmed one by one, but it wouldn't matter if reached the manual override. And burst into the maintenance control room. Was there, working at a console, his fingers flying across the controls. "Step away from the console, Commander," ordered. Turned. He was a middle-aged man with hard eyes and a bitter smile. "Captain, the famous spy who loves aliens more than her own species." "This isn't about love," said. "It's about not murdering innocent people." "Innocent?" laughed. They're warriors. They've killed humans in dozens of border conflicts, and you want to make peace with them. You want to let them into our space, into our lives." "I want to stop a war that will kill millions," said. Growled a deep sound that vibrated in the air. "You planted the bombs. You endangered everyone on the station. That makes you the threat human." His hand moved toward the console. "I'm saving humanity from itself." Moved fast, but moved faster. The young warrior crossed the room in a blur of motion and struck his hand away from the console. The human commander stumbled back, reaching for his weapon. "Don't," warned, her own weapon raised. "It's over, you're caught." But smiled and realized with cold dread that he had already triggered something. On the console screen, a new countdown appeared. 2 minutes. "You can't stop it now," said. "The primary bomb is armed and locked. It's in the diplomatic chamber, right under where the peace treaty was supposed to be signed. When it goes off, it'll destroy the entire central section of the station." "Where exactly?" demanded. "Find it yourself. You have 2 minutes." Grabbed and threw him against the wall hard enough to stun him. "Tell us now, or I will make you." Savagery, gasped. "This is exactly why we can't have peace. You're all monsters." Was already moving, securing with restraints and alerting the command center. "We have a primary device in the diplomatic chamber. 2 minutes to detonation. It's locked and armed." His voice came back, tight with stress. "I'm pulling up the chamber schematics now. If the device is under the signing platform, it's in a reinforced section. You won't be able to access it directly." "Can we contain the blast?" Ambassador asked. "Yes, but someone needs to be inside the chamber to activate the emergency force fields, and they need to stay there until the last second to maintain the field controls. The escape window is 8 seconds maximum. Understood immediately. It was a suicide mission. Someone had to go into that chamber, activate the containment fields, hold them in place while the bomb detonated, then escape through the maintenance tunnels in an impossible. "I'll do it," she said. "No," said, the word was flat and absolute. "I am faster, I am stronger, I have a better chance of surviving the escape." "You don't know human technology. You won't be able to operate the controls fast enough." "Then show me now. We have 90 seconds." They ran together toward the diplomatic chamber. As they ran, explained the force field controls, the timing, the escape route. Absorbed everything with the quick intelligence she remembered from when he was a cub, always learning, always adapting. They reached the chamber. It was empty, the peace negotiations suspended due to the bomb threat. The signing platform stood in the center, and beneath it could see the device had hidden. "I can do this," said. "You've already saved my life once. Now I save yours, it's the way. Life debts must be repaid." "Not like this," said. "I won't let you die for me." "Then come with me, we do this together." Looked at the chamber, at the device, at the timeline. Her mind raced through the calculations. 2 people, working in perfect coordination. One operating the force field controls, one manually reinforcing the field emitters with physical strength. Both escaping through separate maintenance tunnels that split at the back of the chamber. It was insane, but it might work. 60 seconds, warned over the comm. "Whatever you're doing, do it now." And entered the chamber together. They moved to the control panel beside the signing platform. Hands flew over the controls, activating the emergency containment system. Positioned himself at the physical field emitters, his massive strength ready to hold them in place. 40 seconds. The force field began to form, a shimmering barrier of energy that would contain the explosion. But it was unstable, flickering at the edges. Gripped the emitter columns with both hands, using his body as an anchor, his strength reinforcing what the technology couldn't hold alone. 20 seconds. "When I say go, you run for the left tunnel," said. "I'll take the right. Don't look back. Don't hesitate, just run." "Together," said. "We leave together." 10 seconds. Watched the countdown. Her finger hovered over the final activation switch. She could see the strain in his body, see the determination in his eyes. This young warrior who had once been a frightened cub was now willing to die beside her. 3, 2, 1. Go! Slammed the activation switch and dove for the right tunnel, released the emitters and ran for the left. Behind them, the bomb detonated. The force field held, containing the massive explosion in a brilliant flash of light and energy. The diplomatic chamber was completely destroyed, but the rest of the station remained intact. The barriers had worked. Ran through the maintenance tunnel as the blast wave chased her. The tunnel was narrow and dark, barely large enough for her to move. Behind her, she could hear the roar of contained energy, the sound of the station's structure groaning under stress. She burst through a maintenance hatch and fell onto the deck of an auxiliary corridor. Alarms were screaming. Emergency lights flashed, but she was alive. She called into her comm, "Report." For a terrible moment, there was only silence. Then, from the opposite side of the station, a maintenance hatch exploded outward. Crashed through, his armor scorched and damaged, his fur singed but alive. He collapsed onto the deck, breathing hard. And Myra reached their brother first. They surrounded him, checking for injuries, making soft sounds of relief. Myra was chirping again, but this time it was a sound of joy. Reached and pulled her to her feet. "You crazy fool, you actually did it." "We did it," corrected, "all of us, human and together." Sergeant Minu arrived, and for the first time since the summit began, he was smiling. I can't believe I'm saying this, but those warriors are impressive. And I disarmed 3 devices together. She's faster than anyone I've ever seen. Dipped her head in acknowledgement. You are skilled for a human, you fight with honor. Ambassador and War Prince arrived together, both leaders looking exhausted but satisfied. The bombs had been stopped. The saboteur was in custody. The station was safe. What happens now? Asked. The diplomatic chamber is destroyed. We have no place to hold the signing ceremony. Looked at his 4 adopted children, at the humans and who had worked together to survive. We don't need a ceremony room. We need what we just proved we have. Trust, cooperation, the willingness to stand together against threats. Then where do we sign the treaty? Asked. Still catching his breath, spoke up. The observation deck, where we can see the stars. Let the galaxy witness what we do here. It took 3 hours to prepare. The observation deck was a large space with transparent walls showing the void beyond. Seats were brought in, but this time they weren't arranged in separate sections. Human and sat together, mixed and mingled. Stood with the 4 warriors she had saved. They were her responsibility now, in a way she was only beginning to understand. And they stood with her, not as enemies or strangers, but as family bound by shared experience. Ambassador and War Prince approached the signing table that had been set up in front of the vast windows. The treaty documents were ready, the pens were prepared. But before they signed, turned to address everyone assembled. 3 years ago, my children were orphans waiting to die because our laws said they had no value. A human spy saved them. She gave them food, protection, and hope when they had none. Today, that same human and my eldest son stood together in the face of death to save us all. He looked directly at. Captain violated our sovereignty. She stole our secrets. By our laws, she committed crimes worthy of death. But she also showed us that our laws were wrong. She proved that mercy and compassion have no species boundary. Placed his hand over his heart in a gesture of respect. I declare a life debt between my family and Captain. We are bound by honor, now and always. The delegation rose to their feet, acknowledging the declaration. It was a profound statement, one that would have political ramifications for years to come. Ambassador smiled. Then let us make this official. Let us declare that our peoples will stand together, not as separate species, but as allies bound by mutual respect. The 2 leaders signed the treaty as humans and watched together. When it was done, they shook hands, a human gesture that had learned for this moment. The image was captured by every recording device in the room. A human diplomat and a war prince, standing together with the stars as their witness, forging a peace that had seemed impossible just days before. But the image that would become truly famous, the one that would be shared across the galaxy, was taken moments later. It showed standing with Myra. The young warriors had their hands on her shoulders in a traditional gesture of family bond. And despite the differences in size, in species, in culture, they were clearly united. Her identity had been hidden. Her secrets had been buried. But the cubs had recognized her scent, and in that recognition, everything had changed. 6 months after the summit, stood on a balcony overlooking the 3 red moons were rising over a landscape of golden plains and distant mountains. The sky was deeper than Earth's, almost crimson in the fading light. It was beautiful in a way that took her breath away every time she saw it. Behind her, she could hear familiar sounds, and were arguing about philosophy again. Believed that strength came from knowledge, insisted it came from training. They had been having this same argument for months, and neither would ever admit the other had valid points. Was in the training yard below, sparring with younger warriors. Her movements were fluid and precise, every strike controlled. She had become an instructor, teaching the next generation of fighters, and she was good at it. Myra was in the library, as usual. The youngest of the 4 siblings had discovered a love of history and spent most of her free time studying ancient texts. She wanted to understand where her people came from, how their culture had evolved. She asked questions that made the scholars uncomfortable. Had been offered a position as the first human liaison to the Empire, stationed directly on there. She had hesitated at first, still carrying guilt about her deception 3 years ago. But the four warriors had all personally requested her presence, and War Prince had made it clear that her being here would honor his family. So she had accepted, leaving Earth behind to live among a species she had once been sent to spy on. The door to the balcony opened. War Prince stepped out carrying 2 cups of strong tea. He offered one too. "My children are loud this evening," he said, his tone amused. "They're always loud," replied. "I think it's genetic." Laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Over the months, he and had developed an easy friendship. He was nothing like the fearsome warrior prince she had first met. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and surprisingly funny. "I wanted to tell you something," said. "The law reform passed, the one that abolishes the practice of terminating orphan cubs." Turned to him, surprised. "That's wonderful. When?" "Yesterday, the High Council voted unanimously. Orphans will now be given to families who prove their worth through care and protection, not through bloodline." He paused. "The younger are calling it law." She felt heat rise to her face. "That's embarrassing." "That's recognition," corrected. "You saved 4 lives 3 years ago, but your actions have now saved thousands more. Every orphan cub in the Empire now has a chance at life because you showed us that our old ways were wrong." Sipped her tea, not knowing what to say. She had just been trying to do the right thing. She had never imagined it would lead to this. "There is something else," said. "The pure frontier movement on Earth, the extremists who tried to destroy the summit. Your government has offered them a choice: prison or participation in a new program where they work alongside in shared projects." "That seems lenient for attempted mass murder." "Perhaps, but most have chosen the program. They are slowly learning that their fears were based on ignorance. It is not a perfect solution, but it is a start." Below in the training yard had finished her session. She looked up at the balcony and waved back. "She wants to visit Earth," said. "She's been asking for months. She wants to see where you came from, understand human culture better." "I could arrange that," said. "Actually, all 4 of them should come. It would be good for them to see Earth, meet humans in their own environment. And good for humans to meet who are not warriors or diplomats, but simply young people trying to understand the galaxy." Agreed. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moons rise higher. Then spoke again, his voice more serious. "When I found my children 3 years ago, they were broken, starving and terrified, with no hope of survival. I asked them if anyone had helped them, if anyone had shown them kindness. They told me about a shadow in the darkness who brought them food and warmth, a guardian who they never saw clearly but who kept them alive." He looked at directly. "I spent a long time searching for that guardian. I checked facility records, questioned workers, investigated every possibility. I never found any evidence of who it might have been." "You knew it was a spy," said quietly. "I suspected, but suspicion is not proof, and I knew that whoever this person was, they had saved my children when they had no reason to care." Smiled slightly. "I am not a fool, Captain. I knew that if I found this guardian, I would have to choose between duty to the Empire and debt to the savior of my family. I decided that perhaps some mysteries are better left unsolved. Until the summit forced the truth out." "Until my children's hearts forced the truth out," corrected. "They recognized you immediately, you know. The moment your scent reached them, they knew. They had been waiting 3 years to find you again." Appeared in the doorway. He was carrying covered in notes. "Father, I need your opinion on something. Is being unreasonable about the nature of honor." "I am being accurate," called from inside. "You are being traditional." Sighed, "This argument never ends." He stood and turned to go inside, then paused. "Family dinner is in 1 hour. Do not be late. Myra becomes irritable when people are late. He left alone on the balcony. She finished her tea and watched the sky darken, the stars beginning to appear. Earth was out there somewhere, billions of kilometers away. She wondered if she would ever go back permanently, or if this strange alien world had become her home. Footsteps announced Myra's arrival. The youngest warrior was carrying a book, as usual. She settled beside, not speaking, just enjoying the companionship. "What are you reading?" asked. "History of the First Contact Wars," Myra said. "Did you know that humans and first encountered each other 70 years ago, and we've been fighting ever since, with only brief periods of peace?" "I did know that, yes." "It's so wasteful," Myra said. "So many deaths on both sides, all because we didn't understand each other." She looked at with those bright gold eyes. "You understood us. Even when you were supposed to be our enemy, you understood that we were just children who needed help. Any decent person would have done the same." "But they didn't," Myra said softly. "Other walked past our cell every day. They knew we were there. They knew we were starving. And they did nothing because our laws said we had no value. You were the only one who saw past the laws to the truth." Before could respond and joined them on the balcony. They had clearly finished arguing and called a truce, at least until dinner. "Are you coming to the festival tomorrow?" asked. "It's the Harvest Moon celebration. There will be traditional dancing and combat demonstrations." "I don't know the dances," said. "Then we'll teach you," said. "It's important to understand culture if you're going to live here." "And we want to learn human culture," added, emerging from the house to join them. "We want to understand where you came from, what shaped you into the person who saved us." Looked at the four warriors surrounding her, these young people who had grown from frightened cubs into strong and confident adults. They were a family bound not by blood but by choice and circumstance. "I need to tell you something," said. "When I saved you 3 years ago, I wasn't thinking about politics or peace treaties or changing laws. I was just doing what felt right in that moment. I never imagined it would lead to all of this." "That's the nature of kindness," said. "You never know how far it will reach." Dinner was a chaotic affair, as it always was when the entire family gathered. The table was filled with both and human food, an attempt to blend the cultures. Sat at the head of the table, with his 4 children on one side and several other family members on the other. Was given the place of honor at its right hand. The conversation flowed easily between multiple languages. The younger were all learning human languages, while it had improved dramatically. Sometimes they switched mid-sentence, mixing words from both tongues into something entirely new. After dinner, as tradition demanded, asked each person at the table to share something they were grateful for. It was an old custom, one that brought families closer together. When it came to Myra's turn, she stood and spoke formally. "I am grateful for the guardian who saved us when we had no hope. I am grateful that she came back to us. And I am grateful that our family is now bigger and stranger and more wonderful than I ever imagined it could be." The others murmured agreement. Added, "I am grateful that I learned mercy and compassion exist beyond species boundaries." Said, "I am grateful for questions that challenge old thinking and create new possibilities." Stood and looked directly at. "I am grateful for life debts repaid, for bonds that transcend species, and for the proof that true strength includes protecting those who cannot protect themselves." When it was turn, she found herself struggling to speak. She had been a soldier for so long, trained to hide emotions and maintain professional distance. But these people, this strange alien family, had broken through all her defenses. "I am grateful," she finally said, "that 4 cubs recognized my scent, because in that recognition I found something I didn't know I was missing. I found a family. I found a home. And I found proof that the barriers between us are not nearly as solid as we imagine them to be." Later that night, sat in her quarters writing in her personal log. It was a habit she had maintained since her first days as a ghost operative, a way to process her thoughts and experiences. She wrote about the summit 6 months ago, about the moment the Cubs had recognized her, about the choice to admit the truth instead of continuing to hide. She wrote about Commander and the pure frontier extremists who were now slowly learning that their fears were unfounded. She wrote about War Prince and Ambassador, two leaders who had chosen trust over suspicion. She wrote about Sergeant Minu, who had set aside years of hatred to work with. She wrote about Lieutenant, who was now helping establish communication networks between human and space. But mostly, she wrote about four cubs who had become warriors, who had recognized her scent after 3 years, and who had changed the course of galactic history by simply refusing to forget the kindness of a stranger. Her identity had been hidden behind layers of deception and professional distance. She had worn masks for so long that she had almost forgotten what her real face looked like. But the Cubs had seen through all of it. They had recognized her not by what she appeared to be, but by what she truly was. And in that recognition, both and the Cubs had found freedom. The next morning brought the Harvest Moon Festival. The entire capital city was decorated with lights and banners. From across the planet had gathered to celebrate, and for the first time in history, there were humans present as honored guests. Wore traditional clothing, specially made to fit her smaller human frame. Had insisted on helping her get ready, braiding her hair in a style that mimicked warrior markings. The festival was overwhelming in the best way. There was music that thrummed in her chest, dancing that required strength and grace in equal measure, food that ranged from familiar to completely alien. Children of all ages ran through the streets, playing games that transcended species boundaries. At one point, Myra pulled into the dancing circle, protested that she didn't know the steps, but Myra laughed and said that no one cared about perfect technique. The dance was about joy and community, not precision. So danced with warriors, stumbling through steps she didn't know, laughing when she made mistakes. And around her, humans and celebrated together, proving that peace was possible when people chose to see each other as individuals rather than as representatives of their species. As the three moons rose together in the crimson sky, casting their light over the celebration, thought about how far she had come. She had started as a spy, sent to gather intelligence on a potential enemy. She had saved four cubs not because it served her mission, but because it was the right thing to do. And that simple act of compassion had rippled outward in ways she could never have predicted. It had changed laws, forged alliances, and brought two species together. It had given four orphans a family, and it had given one lonely soldier a home. Her identity had been hidden, but the cubs had recognized her scent immediately. And in that recognition, they had all found exactly what they needed. The galaxy was vast and full of different species, each with their own cultures and values, but had learned that beneath all those differences, the fundamental truths remained the same. Love transcended species. Family was defined by choice, not biology, and compassion was the strongest force in the universe. She stood with and Myra as the festival reached its peak. They were her family now, as real as any family bound by blood, and she was theirs. The barriers between them had seemed insurmountable once. Different species, different worlds, different values, but they had found a way to bridge those gaps, one act of kindness at a time. And if they could do it, thought, then perhaps the rest of the galaxy could too. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings to overcome, prejudices to confront. But for the first time in a very long time, felt hope. Because she had learned a simple truth that changed everything. Her identity might have been hidden, but love could not be disguised. Compassion could not be masked. And recognition, true recognition, came not from what you appeared to be, but from who you truly were. The cubs had recognized her scent immediately. And in doing so, they had shown her the way home.